Okay. We're really pleased to have with us today our keynote speaker, Greg Landry from ARP Strategic Futures. Greg is an expert in strategic foresight and a member of the International Association of Professional Futurists. He currently works with the Office of Learning and Transformation at Nova Scotia Community College, and he is a strategist, economist, and planner with over 25 years of experience in public service. Greg is passionate about fostering innovative approaches that position communities for long-term success in a complex and rapidly evolving world. And today his presentation is entitled Navigating Uncertainty by Planning for Multiple Futures. So over to you, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I wanted to start off with a couple of images here. One image is a calm stream, and the other is a raging rapids. Doing this for two reasons. First, it was used in one of the most famous strategic foresight exercises. And by no means this is an endorsement of this specific company that's used it. It's just to show that strategic foresight isn't something that's just in textbooks, but it's used frequently in the corporate world. In the early 80s, planners for this company, basically they presented their senior management with these two images or similar images. One of the calm river, which represented oil prices being stable, and they were stable for years. The second was that of raging rapids, which means in the future, oil prices could be volatile. So now the senior management of that company didn't believe oil prices would ever be volatile. They believed they would stay the same for years. But the planners presented the senior management with change drivers of how oil prices could evolve. And it was enough to convince them that, yes, oil prices could be volatile in the future. That could be a possibility. It was enough to scare them enough to diversify their company, hold back on investments. And sure enough, in the late 80s, the market was flooded with oil. Oil prices tanked. And this company was one of the few companies that was able to weather the storm. And so this company's Royal Dutch Shell. Shell has been using strategic foresight in their business planning process every year for years ever since. The other reason that I chose to use these two images is I believe now our world, unfortunately, could be described as, we're in the rapids, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things happening around us. But our planning processes were built for a calm river. And so what strategic foresight is, it's a tool that helps us navigate the rapids. And before I get into what the tools of strategic foresight, how to use them, the solutions, I want to talk a little bit more about the rapids, to set up the sort of the problem, and strategic foresight is the solution. So think of it as a scary movie, but at the end, there's a happy ending. So our current world, raise of hands, who has heard of the word VUCA? We have a few, not a lot. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's been used for a number of years to describe a world of uncertainty. But since COVID, there's new words that has come about. People believe that VUCA is not a strong enough word to describe our current situation. So BANI has been a word that has been used to describe our current world. Brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. One example, if you think of Donald Trump's tariffs, they're an example of brittle because it shows how brittle our economy is. They make people anxious because of potential job losses. It's nonlinear, on and off again. And it's incomprehensible to most economists. So, that's an example of Bainey. But when we say incomprehensible world, it usually takes on a broader connotation in terms of, we're living in a world where you have multiple crises or mega trends coming together that further increases uncertainty. For instance, a natural disaster caused by climate change can disrupt a supply chain that will increase food prices, that will add to an already affordability crisis, and so on and so on. So you have a real cascading complexity of things going on in our world. And just how uncertain, can we measure how uncertain our world is? So this is the World Uncertainty Index. And as you can see, it's at a record high. So it was developed by the IMF and Stanford University. And it basically measures how much the word uncertainty is used in major publications, economic reports and what have you. And as you can see, it always spikes when there's wildcard events like COVID, financial crisis. Again, right now, probably Trump's tariffs have shot it right, through the roof. But it just shows, again, how uncertain our current world is. And when I say wildcards can come in all shapes and sizes. Most people probably have heard the expression, the elephant in the room. It's a potential risk and we know the impact, we just choose to ignore it. But there's a whole safari of different types of risks. And let me just go through with them for you. And the point is just to show that, again, just trying to paint a picture of how uncertain our current world is. When there's a real surprise is known in strategic foresight as a black swan. It comes from an era where Europeans thought all swans were white, and then they discovered in Australia there were black swans, and it was quite the surprise at the time. And so it's just a metaphor for real surprises. And of course, 9/11 is a classic example where no one could foresee that commercial airplanes would be run into skyscrapers simultaneously, and it would change airport security forever. And so it just shows us that sometimes the unimaginable can happen. Another type of, I guess, wildcard event, little different than the elephant in the room is a gray rhino. And this is a picture from the movie The Big Short of the financial crisis. And really, it's these events where, we know the risk, we know the impact of a financial crisis, but we either underestimate the risk or we don't know when they're going to happen. And so for the 2008-9 financial crisis, some people knew it was going to happen, but most of our institutions thought the system would take care of itself. Unfortunately, it didn't. And finally, this one's a jellyfish. COVID could also be classified as a gray rhino. Bill Gates famously, he had a TED talk that said, the world is not prepared for the next pandemic. We need to prepare. And, the global economy or the global world didn't spend millions on preparedness. And unfortunately, we ended up spending trillions, afterwards. And so what a jellyfish is like, we know the risk is there, but we really underestimate the impact. And so no one could foresee that overnight the whole world would be thrown into remote working and just the devastation that COVID had. So the unsinkable mindset. For those out of town, on the waterfront, we have, and those interested in history, the Museum of the Atlantic has one of the largest artifacts of Titanic, things recovered from the Titanic in the world. But as soon as you walk into the exhibit, you'll see big letters, on the wall that it says, I cannot foresee anything devastating happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has moved past that. And really, that quote sort of sums up sort of the human bias of underestimating low probability but high risk events. The other thing about this, and it's, I wasn't going to mention it, but I think it is more than relevant to this talk, and it sort of scares me when I think about it. But I tried to get AI to generate a picture of the Titanic heading toward an iceberg, and no matter how hard I tried, AI would generate a ship liner with 3 smokestacks. Now, the original Titanic, I didn't know this before I looked at what's going on here. The original Titanic had 4 smokestacks, but the 4th wasn't functional. It was just there for show to make the ship look bigger and richer. And so what AI does, I've been told, is it just takes the average of ocean liners at the time, right? So it'll just give me back the average, and it omits the outliers. And in strategic foresight, it's really important to include the outliers in your planning. And so that's why I mentioned, again, not just a trivial fact, but when I think, I'm a big believer in terms of AI will be tremendous help to humanity, but this gives me thought to pause in terms of there should be some safeguards in terms of when we use AI. So I'm getting to the money slide here, and then before I move on to the solution. In 2014, I was part of developing a report called the One Nova Scotia report, or the IME report, One Nova Scotia Commission. And really, it was about a call to action that we need to boost immigration. But this population projection came across my desk, and I looked at it and I thought, yeah, it's more than accurate, because between 2011 and 2014, our population was slowly declining. And then I thought, yeah, we have more births and deaths. We have people leaving the province. It just makes sense that our population would slowly decline to, our present day right here. And I didn't question it whatsoever. It was more confirmation bias, when I saw the population projection. But you roll the clock back to today, or clock forward, and Nova Scotia's population is over 1 million. And so, that projection missed by a whole lot. But what really got me was when it started to spike here in Nova Scotia, I was with the provincial government, and I was put on a team to try to boost support for a growing population, housing and, healthcare. And I was talking to people dismissed the increase as basically an outlier, a little bump, anomaly. They were convinced the population would drop back down. Almost like when you go to a bank and if you invest in RSPs, the banker says, oh, don't worry, in the short term, but like in the long term, everything's always, it's always, will always make a return. People were convinced that the population wouldn't grow to 1 million. They didn't believe in outliers. And just to give you a sense of how large that outlier is, how many people here are from Nova Scotia? Okay, so those from Nova Scotia, this is 10 times the size of Truro. Anyone here from Newfoundland? So folks from Newfoundland, it's, larger than St. John's, at least the city of St. John's, maybe not the, the greater area. Prince Edward Island. I don't know if anyone from Prince Edward Island. It's about the same population as the entire province of Prince Edward Island. New Brunswick, from New Brunswick, it's bigger than the city of Fredericton. From Quebec here, it's about the size of Trois-Rivières. Ontario, lots from Ontario. Thank you. Win the prize. It's about the size of Guelph. Anyway. Saskatchewan. Yeah, I've got Saskatchewan. You guys don't have any mid-sized cities, but it's about half the size of Saskatoon. Manitoba. From Manitoba. Yeah, so it's a lot bigger than Brandon. Alberta. There's one from Alberta. A little bigger than Lethbridge, both times Lethbridge, and BC. A lot from BC. So it's about the size of Kelowna. So we missed by the size of Kelowna. And I don't know if there's anyone from the territories. Oh, there is? Yeah. So it is, it's bigger than all of the territories put together in terms of population. So I guess my point is, the population might go back down, but in the meantime, you have to plan for outliers, right? Because in the meantime, we have 60,000 housing units, 2,000 nurses that weren't planned for. So it's important that we take planning for outliers into account. And why do people not plan for outliers? Why was people just dismissed that population as a little blip? Again, I'm not pointing fingers. It's part of human nature. One is people don't want to be laughed at. If back in 2014 I said, no, wait a second, our population is going to be 1 million today, I would have got laughed at. But now with my experience going through this, I will say, whoa, that population projection might be off. The other thing is people want to avoid, bad news, right? There's a human tendency not to plan for the worst case scenario. But in fact, if you plan for the worst case scenario and there's a little bump in the road, you're better prepared mentally, financially to deal with little downturns if you plan for the worst case scenario. So again, planning for outliers is important. The other thing, couple other things I'll say before I move into the solution is this projection was put together, in times when it was a calm river, right? Now that we're in the rapids, it's virtually impossible to put a projection 6 months ahead of time. I have economists, friends that, just struggle with how do you put a projection together when you don't know if there's going to be a tariff or not next week, right? So it's a really tough time to plan based on one future or a straight line projection. And lastly, I'll say, this is my personal experience, and this slide is really what got me more interested and sort of in the field of foresight. I've done planning for a long time. I helped write 6 of the province's economic strategies. I wrote a couple dozen regional economic plans. I've prepared several municipal land use plans. I've wrote countless business plans. And over the years, I've used tools of strategic foresight in that planning process, but it wasn't core, right? It was basically, it was a nice thing to do. It added to the process, and I thought it was a good practice. But after going through this experience, now I think foresight is an essential practice. Like, I think we need new tools to plan in our current environment. And with that, I'll get into the more positive aspect of the presentation. Is what is the solution? You might be thinking to yourself, if we don't know what the future holds, or if we can't do a straight line projection, how do we plan? And the answer, one of the answers anyway, is don't plan for a single future, plan for multiple futures. And a real practical example is just it's not strategic foresight, but it's an example of planning for multiple futures, is the federal budget that was released a couple of weeks ago. What they did was they published, here's their baseline forecast of what they think the economy is going to be like next year. And again, the people from Finance Canada they really don't know what's going to happen because of tariffs. So they also published an upside scenario in case things get resolved with tariffs, and then a downside scenario in case things don't get resolved. So that's really an example of 3 future scenarios that the Federal Department of Finance published in the federal budget. So that's what we talk about when we say multiple futures, because when I heard futures plural, I thought myself, like, what is this? But it's not that abstract. And so let me get into the strategic foresight process. It is a merging field onto itself, but typically a strategic foresight process involves these 4 phases. The first phase is scanning for trends, scanning for change drivers, as was mentioned earlier. The second phase is sense making. Looking at critical uncertainties, what do those change drivers mean? Then you get into envisioning, looking at developing scenarios, what are some alternative futures? And then finally, integrating. If you don't take your insights and embed them into action, then, nothing's going to happen. And just go through a little bit at a high level. So again, the first phase is horizon scanning. And that's looking at, trends, change drivers, as we talked about, weak signals, wildcards, as I mentioned, looking at mega trends. So those are the big ones have global impact, like climate change, AI, geopolitics. The next few slides, I'll just give you an example of going from a trend to a change driver to an uncertainty to a scenario. So I pulled this data out of a report from the Library of Parliament. I'm not an expert in this area, but the report said basically that every year more people are getting displaced because of climate change. So that's a clear trend. Now, the uncertainty moving forward is there are really wide range estimates of how many people might be displaced by climate change by 2050. Everything from 1.2 billion to just over 2 million. And again, just for context, the red on the graph is the size of Canada. So the people that displaced by climate change in the future could be enormous. The other uncertainty is, right now, most of those numbers up on the screen are people moving within their own country, so internal migrants, not international migrants. But the uncertainty is that could change. So if we want to look at the issue and identify, how many people displaced by climate change could Canada expect to welcome in the future? What we do is, we look for, what are the change drivers there? And, just as an example, again, I'm not an expert in this area. I just put, maybe in the future, climate refugees will be, recognized as a discrete immigration stream. And the other is just, what happens with climate change and natural disasters going forward? How many people will be displaced? And so what you could do is you can take those two change drivers and actually build scenarios from them, right? So you can build scenarios if global displacement's high or global displacement's low moving forward, and Canada's open or more closed to climate refugees. You could have in a scenario where Canada's really open to people displaced by climate change, or Canada's not so open to people displaced by climate change. And the idea here is not to choose which one is the most likely. It's really to sort of look at all the scenarios and see how you would plan for each individual one. The difference between this type of scenario planning and strategic foresight and what was put out by the federal government, in strategic foresight, you start with future states and you move backwards to build your plan. Whereas the federal plan, sort of, you start with your existing and you move forward. The other thing you could do with a scenario like this is stress test your existing, your existing plan. So you put your plan through it. How would it react to each of the scenarios? And that makes, again, your plan, your organization, more agile. Now, in strategic foresight, again, we use terms like possible futures, plausible futures, preferred futures, probable forecast futures. And, just what it means when we're talking about plausible means this, the future could happen. A preferred future is what we want to happen. And a forecasted future is one, again, we take a straight line projection and we move it forward. And, I hope, we don't use forecasted futures in strategic foresight. And I hope the reason why came across to you in a few slides back. But that's some of the terminology we use. And I would say finally, more slides is integration is so important, right? It's the strategic foresight exercises I've been involved in over the years until recently. We have used it for Halifax's transportation plan. So we're trying to fix the problem of those coming over from Dartmouth. So we use strategic foresight to use some scenarios. But in the past, a lot of it was, again, we do the scenarios, but we wouldn't truly integrate them in the work. And it is so important that you take the scenarios and you integrate them into your plans and your organizations. In that way, you sort of build a muscle to be more agile for future needs. You can anticipate challenges and opportunities. You build resilience. You can enhance collaboration and service innovation through strategic foresight. Strategic foresight is definitely a participatory process. It involves more partners because the more perspectives, the better. To avoid missing outliers, what have you. And finally, I just want to leave you with some strategic foresight principles. The first is, explore multiple futures, not just one, right? It's, that's the whole idea behind strategic foresight. Second, challenge assumptions. Again, as I mentioned, it actually takes courage to sort of point out outliers and say, this, what if, this could happen. And, if people laugh at you, then you're on the right track. That's one of the rules of strategic foresight. It should be in one of the principles. Think in systems, right? So strategic foresight is about connecting the dots, about, how multiple organizations work together, engage diverse perspectives. Again, it is about looking things from as many viewpoints as possible. And the future's not predetermined, right? It's, going back, people think I'm sort of really negative against forecasting. I still think it has some uses in some contexts. But I always worked in economic development, and I had back and forth with the forecasters at finance, and I always said, my job's not to predict the future, but it's to shape the future. And folks here have the agency to shape the future based on their actions. And finally, I discussed, make foresight actionable, because a better future starts with better decisions today. So thank you.
Okay, so now it's your chance to ask questions. Please use Slido to submit your questions for Greg. Wow, we already have questions. Okay. We'll give you a minute to enter your questions and to upvote questions if you like. So please do use Slido and think about what you would like to ask. And just while these questions are coming in, I wanted to say that this session is sponsored by the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society. While you're voting on questions, thinking of questions, we'll have a very short video from CCIS.
Since 1981, Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, CCIS, has been a beacon of hope for refugees and immigrants in our community. We stand as a community leader, offering comprehensive services through a diverse team of dedicated professionals. Serving newcomers out of 26 locations across Calgary and southern Alberta, we are deeply rooted in the heart of our communities, ensuring accessible support for all. Our team, a mosaic of cultures comprising more than 500 employees and over 2,000 volunteers, collectively speaks over 70 languages, ensuring every client feels heard, understood, and valued, making CCIS a beacon of impact, diversity, and inclusion. Through our Southern Alberta rural initiatives, we not only address the settlement and integration needs of newcomers in small and mid-sized centers, but we work with rural communities to initiate programs that assist with the attraction, retention, and integration of newcomers in these communities. Our rural service delivery thrives on the principle that the community is our client, enabling us to remove barriers and foster welcoming and inclusive communities for those we serve. In partnership, we empower immigrants and refugees to successfully settle and integrate in our communities. CCIS, building an inclusive and prosperous society, one newcomer at a time.
Great, and now on to the questions. So the first question, Greg, what would you suggest as a practical, small way that busy, overstretched settlement sector organizations can build foresight planning into their way of working? Just an easy question to start.
Yeah. So for a year, my job was to basically build capacity, strategic foresight within the provincial government. And, I had 60 people involved from different departments that were, again, very busy, overstretched. But they made the time to sort of come together, even, half a day, a month to learn about strategic foresight. And so, again, I think, there may be a way of, small organizations coming together to learn strategic foresight a little bit at a time. So, a quick answer.
Okay. The next question, how do you imagine the future of the settlement sector in Canada?
Yeah.
We're not asking easy questions today.
Yeah, easy questions. Yeah, I mean, so I think, you folks, so I'm not going to cop out of this one, but I will a little bit because, strategic foresight is a participatory process, right? So as a practitioner of strategic foresight, what I do is bring people together to, go through and discuss the issues. So I think the folks in the room would be better at, answering, this question, than I would. Again, though, I would, from a futures perspective, I'm always looking at, what are mega trends that are going to drive the organization. And I have, most of the time I present on, here's the mega trends. I mentioned, climate change. That might be an issue. AI, definitely, definitely an issue moving forward. So it's like, I think, you look at these mega trends, technology, demographics, right? Those aren't wild cards that are going to be around with us. So those are the easiest way to say, to look at, what might happen in the future.
And can I also say tomorrow we will be doing the Foresight exercise after lunch, and everybody will have a chance to contribute in table discussions, and you're actually going to talk about what do you think the future of immigration, the possible futures, I should say plural, of immigration will look like. So that's what we're going to be working on tomorrow specifically. Next question. When dealing with multiple futures, how do you determine where to allocate resources in the present?
Yeah, I guess there's a number of, when you're dealing with multiple futures, there's a number of tools to actually look at how each future. So the idea is not to pick one future, but stress test your plan against those multiple futures. Like look at plan A, plan B, plan C, and where the plans intersect. That's where you put your resources. Again, I'll use the example of Shell. Not that I'm a fan of Shell by any means, but it's a real example. What they did was they looked at, okay, well, the world can move to green energy, but we still have a lot of business in traditional oil. Well, let's get into natural gas because it's a bridge between going the clean energy route and staying the oil route. So a lot of times your strategy is about, where is there a bridge? I'll also say, strategic foresight is about, a lot of it has to do with how the change of planning. It's about building internal capacity to adapt. And lots of times I use the analogy of firefighting, right? It would be great if firefighters knew that a fire is going to break out down the road next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. They don't know what the future holds, but they prepare for all kinds of situations. They have building codes, they do fire drills, and that's the same idea in strategic foresight, is you build capacity to prepare for multiple futures.
Okay, I think this is going to be an easier question. I'm just going to skip the first one for a minute and go to the second one, which is, can you suggest some resources for strategic foresight that can support agencies in the journey of implementing this practice together?
There's, in Canada, Policy Horizons Canada has resources up on their website. It depends how formal. There's a lot of organizations that do provide strategic foresight materials for free on their website. Again, I could probably provide a list or talk to me on LinkedIn. I can give you a list of free resources. In terms of formal training, you could do a whole master's degree in strategic foresight in the college in Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, strategic foresight. You can do certificates online from a lot of organizations, and as well, a number of universities offer certificates and degrees in strategic foresight if you want to go more formal.
So we can circulate after the conference, or maybe even during the conference, some resources that people could use for the future. And I think Policy Horizons does have a great set on their website. Okay. So this is, I think, a challenging question. What do you think about the latest report showing that many skilled immigrants are leaving Canada at a high rate?
Yeah. I mean, it's my personal opinion. It is unfortunate. And again, I think that it's part of, as I showed earlier back, why I take strategic foresight to heart is I think we could have did a better job of planning, anticipating for the needs of newcomers, and that's why I'm here today, is just to spread the message that strategic foresight can help with anticipation. We definitely have, again, as also an economist, we have skill shortages across the board here in Nova Scotia, so we definitely need people. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, how do you plan? The text is a bit small. How do you plan strategically when agencies are forced to compete for the? I can't read this. Can you read that?
Which
small.
one?
The top one.
Oh.
Are forced to compete for their existence, to implement similar strategies. Okay. How do you plan strategically when agencies are forced to compete for their existence to implement similar strategies to improve their programs? Thanks for enlarging that.
Yeah. Again, these are just easy questions. But I mean, it is, you do find strategic foresight used. Again, going back to the example, it can be used in a lot of situations where agencies are in trouble and finding. So what it can do is sort of the idea of strategic foresight. Instead of like, okay, here's what your revenues will be in the future. It's to look at what if there's a big downturn. So you stretch your thinking. So let's say, what I'm trying to say is, let's say your organization needed to take a 10% cut. With strategic foresight, you look at, well, what would a 90% cut look like? And by doing that, it actually stretches your thinking, and you might come up with some innovative ways to look at, rather than if you just plan for a 10% cut, you might not stretch your thinking. So that's one of the powers of strategic foresight. I'd also say, it's used widely amongst international NGOs in disaster relief and what have you. So it is used. That's one area where strategic foresight's widely used to support again local organizations in like the Red Cross has a strategic foresight unit, for instance.
Okay, maybe we'll do two more questions. So how do you compare the retirement rates and the population change?
I mean, I can speak for Nova Scotia. It's going to be an issue for the next number of years. I look at it more simply. I look at how many people are over 55 and approaching retirement. And I mean, you could look at retirement rates from Stats Canada as well. But the numbers are scary here in Nova Scotia. In a lot of sectors, we have over 30% of the workforce over 55. So large retirement rates are, again, we've had great growth in population here in Nova Scotia, but now with the caps, things might level out. So yeah, don't know how to answer that question.
Okay. If the government is using forecasting and the sector moves to foresight, how do we align our interests to have common language, dialogue, etc., so that we can plan together for the future? And this is assuming that the government only uses forecasting and not foresight.
Yeah, no, good question. I think it's and I've run against this. I'd say I'm a recovering economist, so I've done forecasting myself, and some of my economist colleagues are reluctant to drop their tools, but we're able to put the two together, right? And the way I look at it is traditional forecasting. There's more. Well, yeah. Again, we're assuming that the government doesn't use it, but as I mentioned in the budget, more and more often economists are including risks to forecast. And that sort of dovetails nicely with strategic forecast planning. So that's how I explain it. Usually we end up somewhere in the middle.
Okay, and last question. Maybe I'll ask you the second one. Sorry, whoever voted for the first one, but I think probably the second one. Do you have strategies? Where did that question go? Oh, do you have strategies or tips to use strategic foresight for a sector with high turnover? I think an important question.
Yeah, I think it's, strategic foresight really at the heart of it is about embedding actions in systems. And I think, there's two parts of it. It's building capacity in individuals, but I also think it's just like forecasting might be embedded in systems. Strategic foresight can be embedded in systems. So I think embed the process in your organization is how you go about doing that. Great.
Well, thank you so much for leading us off. And this sets a great tone for the conference. And I believe we're now going to be breaking for lunch.